Lisa, I want to welcome you to the show today.
Thank you, Bill. Happy to be here.
Well, this has been a long time coming, and I'm really excited. I think last year was a big year for you. And I thought, gosh, you've been a part of the CIO Mastermind group for several years now. And let's say last year you won the 2022 Capital CIO ORBIE. You were the winner in the large corporate division. You were the National 2023 Corporate Finalist for the InspireCIO. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And you're also the Programs Chair Advisory Board for the Capital CIO now. And also you're very involved in George Mason University, which I'm assuming is your alma mater, correct?
Correct. That's where I got my MBA, yeah.
Your Distinguished Patriots Alumni Award. And I think you're also running a specific program there on the fundraising committee for a specific program. What is that program again?
It's called the Women in Business Initiative under the School of Business at George Mason, and it's an endowment philanthropy advisory board where it's just very rewarding, where we get to support young people in their journey, educational journey, and support them financially, those who are in need and who are succeeding well, and we want to just make it easier for them in life. It's an opportunity to mentor as well, so very fulfilling.
Fantastic. Well, now tell us a little bit about where you are now. Tell us a little bit about your current state, and then we'll explore a little bit about how you got there.
Well, currently I'm the CIO for Dewberry. We're an engineering and architecture firm, and we're all over the United States, West Coast, East Coast, North and South, everything from roads and transportation to supporting the federal government, FEMA and disaster support, architecture, doing really cool designs for like Sweet Greens and Rad Bike and Yeti to your more traditional stuff like libraries and schools. And of course, the engineering goes everything from green engineering to, all the cutting edge stuff, plus all the really traditional services too. So it's a fabulous opportunity. I've learned so much in this role in the last 5 years. So I'm blessed to be there.
So how did you, when you were coming out of high school and going into college and such, did you have ambitions of going down this path, or did it just how did it materialize for you? What did your first job out of college look like compared to where you are today?
I was clueless. I think like many kids right out of college or out of high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. My dad helped me, said, hey, get into that management information stuff, that you might figure it out there. And honestly, I didn't figure it out. So went 4 years through college, got the degree. And then next thing you know, I'm doing C++ programming in a skiff, and I wanted to stick a pencil in my eye. To me, it was the most boring thing I could do, which I love coders and developers. I think they're the most talented, fascinating brains you'll meet on the planet Earth. But for me, being the social creature that I am, it was torture. The winds were too far apart. I didn't get to interact with enough people. It just wasn't meant for me.
So obviously that's a big difference from where you are today, from where you started. How did they morph? What was the next biggest step for you that you felt was kind of a milestone for you?
That's a good question. Actually, that very first job parlayed into my very first company that I own. And it's a crazy story, but I was working for the CIA, and the CIA, if you don't know, they hire a lot of deaf individuals, and my government COTAR is deaf. So I learned sign language, and every day I would come in and say, teach me these 10 words, teach me these 10 words. And I had the technical background, and one day the interpreter didn't come, and they said, can you try? And next thing you know, I'm digging this because I'm learning new stuff. I understand things a little bit better than interpreters do because they don't have the technical background. The CIA sent me to Gallaudet. I got my, certification so I could work for the CIA. I became the only clear technical sign language interpreter the agency had. But then you have to learn business, right? You've got to be able to do your taxes. You need to set up your benefits. You need to, all of a sudden I was plunged into the world of basic corporate, functional areas that you have to learn to just take care of yourself. And it was a wonderful education. And
as a business owner, right? Is that what you're referring to?
As a business owner. And of course, learning the deaf community and ASL and the ethics of interpreting, that was all fascinating. But to be an interpreter, you have to be a machine. So you're not allowed to give your opinion. You're not allowed to problem solve. and that didn't work for me. So I went back into tech. I went back into the tech world doing some technical training. Then I became a program manager, and then that turned into small programs to bigger programs to really large programs. So yeah, it was a journey. That was a major shift right there. That first company that I owned.
When did you discover like what your real superpower is and your real like strengths? When did you kind of settle into, this is, I know you definitely had some other experiences in there, but I'm curious, like, how did you start to develop like what your real grounded, real strength is?
I would say probably where it really came to light, I was working at NCTC, Counterterrorism Center,
Okay.
on a program where we were keeping bad actors out of the country after 9/11. So doing identity management, no-fly lists, things like that, Visa Viper list. And that was a project where we had data coming in from everywhere, CIA, Homeland Security, all these places, and they all had their own rules, and they all had their own stakeholders, and it was highly political, and it was failing. And so what then I really realized was how I could bring people together, how I could problem solve for a mission, get people focused on it, do team building in like really critical moments where tensions are high, and get results. And then I'm like, okay, this is something that I can do well. And then that parlayed into building teams, going into dysfunctional organizations, making them functional, and restoring pride is like one of the things that I love to do. Give me something beat up and broken and sad, and let me get to them a place where not only are they cooking with gas and they're respected in the organization, but they have that joy and that pride back into who they are as individuals and who they are as a team. And that's very fulfilling for me. That's where I think I shine.
Well, it's really interesting. I want everybody who's listening, and some of you are going to be watching this, but I have Lisa's book called The Joy Factor: Escaping Job Disappointment and Finding Your Dream Career. And when you mentioned the word restoring pride and joy, I just thought this was a good point to introduce the book. It's 123 pages. It's a fun book to read. It's light, but it's very powerful in some of the messages that you talk about here. And what was the genesis of this book? Like, I know it mentions like 10 years ago you had the idea, but what actually started you thinking about writing it?
Well, it actually was my nieces and nephews who are millennials now, or were millennials then too, but they were entering the workforce, and a lot of their friends and even themselves felt this just deep sense of being unsatisfied and being disappointed and not being able to make that difference, and feeling like, they're in the cube farm and they don't have a purpose. And I thought about how happy I am and how happy I am in my career. But I remembered that first job as that C++ programmer where I wanted to stick the pencil in my eye. And I remembered, I went through that journey that they're going through. And if there was some way I could accelerate them to a place where their joy factor is way bigger now, quicker, and they wouldn't have to go through the slog, and they could actually have control. And of course, having that engineering mindset, how can we systematically do it so that you're making the right decisions and using the right mind frame to bring you joy just quicker, so that you can enjoy life quicker, and you're not counting the hours on the wall on a sticky note when you're at work.
So it was really the genesis with your nieces and nephews related to them coming in to the workforce and being like really unhappy and disappointed. And then you were looking at it from your perspective and like how you had really become very happy in your career. That's a powerful reason to make this book. Do you find, not just within your nieces and nephews, but do you find that that's an issue with hiring millennials within your company or other companies right now that you thought that this could impact?
Well, indeed, I look at things like the Great Resignation and quiet quitting, which is basically, we're not going to take it anymore, we're checking out, right? And whether, and COVID played, of course, a huge influence in the workforce exodus and people finding their own way, whether it's doing the gig economy so that they can have control back, right? It's that sense a person wants to be able to control their destiny. They want to, whether that's the hours of the day you work or how you work or what you're doing. And so Yeah, I think today's influences actually, it transcends millennials now. I think really this model can be used anyone in your career, and even now, and I'm looking at, what's in my future. And I talk to my boss about this all the time, about how can I add value to Dewberry in a way that's going to bring me joy using my superpowers. And that's what everybody should be doing, right? How could you add value in the organization that you're at right now that's going to bring you joy? And when you put those two things together, like magic can happen.
But what's really interesting, one of my, as I mentioned, Katie on my team was reading the book. I said, I want you to read it, see what you really liked about it. And then as I was reading it, and we compared notes, and I said, with one thing that never was mentioned here was this is for Lisa, this whole message is an inside out game. It's the joy starts with the individual, and then first as the genesis point. You're shaking your head, but what are your thoughts about that? Because I think many people think that that's like something they got to search for outside of themselves, but you reverse that.
Correct. And it's so important. It's a life lesson, and some of us never learn it. And that is, joy does come from within. Your own happiness, the only person who can control that is you, not how you were brought up, not your parents, not your partner, not your spouse, not your children, not your pets. It has to come from within. So
not pets.
Well, pets do play a role, I have to say. I do have to say, except for when they're naughty. But for the most part, they are unconditional love, which is fantastic. But
it's an anomaly.
But it's mindset, right? It's about how you interpret the world. You can remember, you can only control you. You can't control others. Don't assume what's in other people's brains, because you can't make assumptions on that. Assume good, and then, apply yourself in ways that, again, are fulfilling who you are. And again, that's where the journey can begin. And it can be very small micro steps that over time, when done consistently, you're going to see a difference in your life.
And one of the things about the book that I really liked was, so it's one thing to say that, but then you actually break it into some really tangible things you can do within a journaling process that I thought was really powerful, and as a way to kind of help mold your own thinking patterns around issues and things that are coming up in your experience. And how did you come up with the idea of journaling? Like, it was something that you've always done, or is it something you learned?
It is much like a lot of our young people today. When I was coming out of college, I actually suffered from anxiety, and I found journaling to be an excellent tool, again, to get control, feel a sense of control. And to really articulate in black and white what changes and what life events are happening to me. So it started with that, and that was a very powerful healing tool for me. But then when I started really coaching and mentoring people in a much broader way, which is a big part of what brings me joy now, is when I kind of developed let's write down everything that's making you happy, and let's write down everything that's not. And let's just start there. And so that coaching and mentoring role that I was fulfilling, whether it was with my own direct reports or with others, that's where I kind of developed this system of let's document what your joy factor is, and then let's systematically move things over from the negative to the positive column and reframe our mind and look for opportunities that are going to be, giving you more exposure to that joy and less exposure to the stuff that you don't like.
Yeah, I find it, when journaling, it's sometimes people can make the mistake where you're journaling about everything, and it can, if you come from a ruminating, anxiety-based mind, it can actually turn into more anxiety because you're ruminating. Now, the antidote to that is what you've developed in the book, which is actually having the things that are actually going. So taking that tough situation, writing down the things that aren't, but then you force your brain to actually write down the things you're getting. And that makes it much more balanced for the brain.
It does. And you will be surprised. It's often, what's the last thing that you've been exposed to, and the last negative thing that you're exposed to that often has the most power in your brain. But if you force yourself on a daily basis to write down what were the most wonderful things that happened to you in a day, much like gratitude journals. I mean, there's a lot, stealing from that philosophy for sure, but as it relates to work, and then really dissecting it and investigating what it is. This interaction brought me joy. Well, why?
Yeah.
What were you doing? Were you coaching? Were you problem solving? Were you just listening? Were you being a friend? You know, were you getting to use math? And what was it that was special, that 1 hour block on a Tuesday you wrote down that brought you joy? And be very mindful and specific about the part that brought you joy.
Yeah, it's interesting because even like with myself, it's like sometimes there can be things that I've done for years and you can just label them. Like the brain just wants to take a chunk of stuff and just call it bad or uncomfortable or just hatred of it. But then when you actually look at the individual components, like you're saying, getting very specific, you can actually find, well, it's not all 10 things. It's like 7. So there's actually 3 things that you liked in it. It's just that when you marry it with everything else, it makes it, bad. So that's an interest. That is so you actually teach people that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're someone I'm mentoring, it's usually one of the first assignments that I give you. Yeah. And then if you can marry that to, if somebody's on a leadership journey and wants to be a leader, if you can marry some leadership competencies to your joy factors as well, and your strengths, and you pull all that together, it becomes this wonderful individual development program, all surrounded and powered by joy. So imagine that. So,
yeah.
and that, you know, you get the energy from that, the X factor of, you know, you 10X your results when you do it that way, instead of, I'm going to slog through these, I'm going to check the boxes because someone in HR has it on a list on a website that I need to do these things so that I can get the next, you know, token. Well, you know, that usually doesn't work.
No, it doesn't. And so you had, one of the chapters is joy acceleration. Tell me what you mean by joy acceleration, because then you use the word 10X, which I love because this is, you know, a 10X podcast.
I figured you'd like that. That was a little bone for you.
I always like that. But, you know, I think sometimes we think that 10X can come from only from like an exponential technology like AI, or it comes from, again, something outside of us. But what I love about your thesis and approach is that's a inside out journey, that if you're 10Xing yourself, then you're going to be able to marry up with an opportunity that might present a 10X opportunity. So, but tell me what you mean by acceleration of joy.
Again, it's how do you get to that place where your joy factor is overwhelming the not so good factor?
Okay.
And so how do you get there quicker, right? How do you get to that journey quicker? And so there's so many things you can do, but the most powerful thing you can do is let people know.
Oh, okay. In what way?
You know, it's so funny because whether it's somebody not putting in an IT ticket because something's broken and then grumbling about it, or it's your own career, if you don't tell people what your aspirations are, how can they help you get there? If you don't tell the universe that you want to be a leader, or you want to do digital transformation, or you want to get into business intelligence, or you love data, if you don't tell people that and tell the universe these are your aspirations, it's much harder to get there. And how do you tell the universe? There's lots and lots of ways. Okay, lots of ways. It's about branding yourself, and that's from your resume, your CV. What are you documenting in your resume? Are you documenting the things that you hate to do? That's a big mistake, right? I'm not saying lie on your resume. Don't do that. But don't make, like, you know, I think there's an example of the book, actually my very first job when I was doing the C++ programming, which I hated. Maintenance, C++ programming, you know, in the Unix environment, solving problems. Well, what I really loved doing was working with analysts, finding out, you know, their workflow, problem solving with them. So you rewrite what you did was, you know, a problem solver investigating solutions with the end customers to make them more productive. That's what I was doing. I wasn't a C++ programmer. I was problem solving, working with customers, and getting to make a difference. And that's a quick example of that. But really take a moment and look at how you're branding yourself, to not only from a professional perspective in your resume and your LinkedIn profile, etc., to what do you want? So many times I'll look at someone's resume. Can you look at my resume? And well, I really want to get into, green energy and and I look at their resume and they have nothing associated with what they want to do. And they don't even say what they want to do up in the objective. And I know objectives maybe not the coolest thing to do right now. There's some advice on that, but you've got to let people know what you want to do.
Yeah, you got to. So maybe that's a worthiness issue, and maybe that's people just don't feel that
Right.
that they can pull to themselves, their actual near perfect or near perfect aspiration. Maybe that's the issue.
I think you're right. Again, a lot of coaching and mentoring around imposter syndrome.
Mm,
The stories we tell ourselves about ourselves, if we could be more kind to ourselves, then we'd be more willing to take risks, and it's okay to fail, and finding that good ecosystem where you can do just that. And so that helps you accelerate your joy as well.
yeah,
The big thing I say in the book is, give the organization you're with the opportunity to do the right thing for you. You
mm,
might be surprised on how you can leverage your own strengths, etc., for the good of the firm in a way that increases your joy. And who better to know than you, who's sitting in the middle of it all? You should know where opportunities are. You should be able to look around and see where you can apply yourself and
sure.
then insert yourself into it. I created so many jobs for myself that had nothing to do with my title. At Dewberry, I'm in charge of leadership for the company, one of our 5 corporate goals. How many CIOs, get to do
Yeah,
that?
I was going to get to that. We are going to get to that leadership
Okay.
part because that is a very, very interesting. But I think this is, I'm just on this path.
Sure.
I think one of the things you're talking about is building momentum around oneself. And if you've got I've had this analogy before, if you have a train on a train track going one way, these are big objects pulling a lot of cargo. But then if you have another train going the opposite direction, it's going to slow you down because you're dragging this other big train with you. And I think sometimes people's concept of themselves is that in what they have this big momentum, they want to start in one direction, but then they have this other train going in the other. And what I like about what you're talking about is you're building momentum on the side of the 5149. It's you want to build such momentum around the train that's going that actually, even if you are dragging that negative momentum, it'll overwhelm it because you have so much speed and velocity.
That's right. That's exactly
Mm.
right.
So leadership, because we've had some talks about how obviously CIO. So we have all the regular CIO responsibilities and the digital transformation and that, but then you also pulled on this leadership part. Talk to me about, like, did that something that you came into the job, like it was something that you knew you were going to get, or did you kind of inherit it?
No, not at all. Now, I will say when they interviewed me for the job and were recruiting me for the opportunity, they kept saying, this is a leadership role. This is a leadership role. This team really needs help from a leadership perspective. And,
Sure.
and they would show me examples. But then a year and a half, 2 years into the role, it was time for us to do our new corporate planning. And a big push from our board of directors was, and they're so super smart and correct, is that we have a national crisis. And what is that crisis? Baby boomers are retiring or almost retired, almost done. The next generation, my generation, is really small, just from a numbers perspective.
Okay.
And then you have millennials right behind us, right? Which are much bigger, but they quiet quit. They're working hybrid, they're in the gig economy, they're not necessarily going through the same leadership journey that we went through our previous generations,
Sure.
right, wrong, indifferent, and lots of reasons why. So there's going to be this national void from a leadership perspective. So the board said, no. We're not going to squish leadership in one goal with retention and other HR goals. We're going to pull this out, create a separate goal, and be mindful and do real tactical things to increase the leadership acumen of the entire firm. And not like a set of high potential middle managers, not executive coaches for the top levels of the organization. We really need to look at leadership as something everyone in Dewberry needs to develop. And
Okay.
so that was our mission. And it has been so rewarding, starting off with just defining what are our leadership competencies that we're going to be using and modeling as a tool that we use in everything we do around leadership now. and then creating different programs around leading self, leading others, leading organizations, leading leaders. And then what does that look like? And what opportunities can we bring to people? And how do we deliver performance feedback to crucial conversations, to everything that comes along with it? So I'm rambling. I don't know if I answered all your question, but it's been this wonderful, again, board awareness and ownership awareness, and that we have, even at Dewberry ourselves, we have a huge chunk of our senior leadership population that is retiring in the next 2 years.
And those are going to be the Gen Xers and the baby boomers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what are we doing for succession planning? Let's get really super serious about it. What are our mission critical positions? And, who are we right seating, and oh, by the way, don't forget about diversity, equity, inclusion. We need to start looking like our customers look in our leadership roles. How do we bring all that to the fore in a very powerful way and a purposeful way, right? And not just let it happen to us, but, really from a ground up and the entire organization approach. How do we manage upskilling everyone's leadership?
So are you going to be creating more like a self-managed company where everybody from the bottom up has these leadership skills from kind of a 360-degree management from themselves, their team, and then is that kind of the philosophy?
I don't know if Dewberry is very good about being flexible with our work arrangements, and because we're regional and all over the country, what works in the Northeast does not work in the Panhandle of Florida, does not work in California. And so one of the superpowers that Dewberry has is the ability to let people lead the organizations in a way that best suits the ecosystem that they're in. But we still, the underlying philosophy is, if we invest in everyone from a leadership perspective, then we're all going to benefit, right? All boats rise together with the tide. And when you do it that way, you might discover leaders where you might in ways, in places where you wouldn't have discovered them before.
So this kind of gap in the millennial structure, you're essentially saying, all right, we're not going to focus on the gap, we're going to focus on the whole, and essentially just reinvigorate a different approach versus trying to figure out something that may be unfigureoutable.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Interesting. And that was driven from the board.
Correct.
Okay. Well, and how many people do you what percentage of your time each week is really dedicated, or each month to efforts around that particular journey, that leadership journey?
Oh, goodness, that's a good question. Specifically for that goal, now I will say this year I'm taking an emeritus role because, again, succession planning. So my deputy is now going into the chairperson, which I'm very excited for her to take over. And I get to be emeritus, which means you're revered and you're still the center of attention, which works for me beautifully. But so I get to do actually where my joy factor really is, and that is I get to coach and mentor them. But back before the new year, every week we were, whether it was rolling out a leading self program or recruiting people for a leading others cohort, or, we have a leadership book club, which I know you love books. So we do.
That's very cool.
Leadership book club. We're now entering our 3rd year of, a book club. And even that has evolved, where it just started off with, let's get some people together and read some books, right? To now where it's mapped to our leadership competencies and what we're trying to do in a business cycle in the year, like when budget planning's going on, or we're figuring out client management, and team development and performance reviews. It's all mapped out in a very purposeful way. So even that has evolved to a place that.
What's been your favorite book so far that you've had in the book club?
Oh my gosh, don't ask me that question.
I'll let you think about it as you go. Then it'll pop in your head.
Yeah, I'm reading 2 right now. We're actually.
How about the framework that you're using? Like, is there some national framework for this type of endeavor? Like, did someone on the board say, hey, I was exposed to, XYZ company has this type of a way to do this. They can help us quick start it and move it along?
For sure, when it came to programs like our Leading Others program, which this is kind of our folks who have direct reports, who've been in leadership roles for a little bit, so they know the basics on how to read a P&L and do some management things.
Yeah.
But now it's time to create high-performing teams, and so that program, which is like a 6-month program, and it's a cohort. You know, we looked at lots of different models, like Centers for Leadership, and partnering with George Mason, and up to come up with, you know, the program that we have. And it's wonderful in so many ways, just the feedback that we're getting, you know, from the participants, and the scrambling of people wanting to be in the program. It's a wonderful retention thing, and the dividends, even just if you've ever been through a cohort program within an organization, you know, the network and the bonding that you create, which cannot be, you know, you really need to shine a light on that, because the power of that is priceless. You know,
A cohort program
where people from all over the country are put through this development scenario over a long term, and they really get to know each other. And then when you're in front of a customer and you're used to doing transportation engineering and building roads, and all of a sudden they're like, yeah, but do you know anything about, you know, urban planning and community planning? You're going, oh my gosh, I sat next to an architect that does that. I'm just going to call her, you know, where before you'd be like, oh, I guess I'll tell my boss, who I'll wait for to go up the chain and then maybe down the chain to find somebody who could do it. Now you make those powerful networks within the organization that can 10x what you're doing within your own company.
You're almost creating a network brain by linking people together, and it's almost like a way to be more agile, not overusing the word, but you're actually investing in the agility of the organization in many respects, because that it's not just the technology connecting us, it's actually the people.
It is, and they do. Yeah, I had some of my own, and I push for IT leaders to get in those programs.
Okay.
And we've had a seat in every one, and that's by design, because IT needs to be able to partner with the business, right? So which means you need to understand the business, which means you need to know who the people are delivering the business.
Yep.
And those connections, even for us in our own organization, have been wonderful.
It's almost like the silent business analyst, you know, they can just kind of just kind of quietly get into the teams. Oh, and you have a little business analyst everywhere now. What questions what from the new people that you interview and talk with and bring into the organization, you seem to leverage the power of questions quite a bit. I'm curious, from like the top people that you interview that get to you, what differentiates kind of the new people coming into the organization and the type of questions and things that they're asking versus the ones that don't make it through?
The ones that make it through, the kinds of questions they're asking me.
The questions that they're asking you, and in sort of the highest performing people that come in, and then the new folks, you know, the folks who are in their 20s and early 30s, like how are they differentiating themselves in coming into the company that is refreshing?
I think the ability to have a dialogue around change management, communication, culture, those things together, communication and culture, and are they going to fit in you know, our Dewberry values? Are they going to be able to be successful? Are you going to fit into the culture? Are you going to rub against the culture? What's your level of risk taking, and does that match with the culture that you're about to go into? So candidates that can articulate and their story around that, I like to ask a lot of behavioral, tell me about a time, you know, questions that will reveal how they problem solve, will reveal their, you know, their risk tolerance and how they manage risk, will reveal how they treat people and how they move through the world through adversity and in good times, and what brings them joy. That's a really big one. You know, of course that's going to be a question I ask, but I want to pull that out of that experience in the interview. You know, are they going to be a fit and be adding value in a way that makes them happy? Because if they can't do that, then they're not going to stay. So, and it's going to be a rub, and there's going to be tension, and you know, I'd rather have somebody who's going to, jump in a positive way and already feel fulfilled, very quickly.
Right, because that's going to give them that extra oomph that you're looking for from that inside out point. So what is, as far as when CIOs are reaching out to you now, because you're now this, you've kind of reached I'm sure it's not the pinnacle of your life, but you've reached a certain depth of achievement. And I'm sure people reach out to you about, crafting their next career and what they're going to do. What do you see as the top problem on how people approach that whole process? Like what assumptions do you try to quickly shift when someone comes to you and go, look, I'm looking to make a move out of my current CIO role into another one? What do you see was the biggest assumption of all the people you talked to so far?
I think the biggest opportunity lost is creating healthy relationships where they're at and creating powerful networks where they're at. And I have this phrase of, are you creating pillars of goodwill? When you and your IT organization fall down, does the rest of the organization run to you and do one or two things? Do they pick you up or do they kick you in the ribs? Which one's it going to be? And so and the answer to that 100% depends on the relationships that you have with the rest of the organization. Are you enabling everybody else? Which, by the way, being in the CIO and being in IT is one of the most unique, as you know, positions where you get to do that. You could do that every day, all day long, because you get to touch every piece of the organization. What everybody's doing in a way that nobody else does, and have that broad, diverse understanding of what's going on in the organization. And have you lost opportunities to create relationships, and therefore, and then that parlays to the next one. So you're leaving why? That's usually the first question. What aren't you getting in the situation you're in? And I try to coach people to at least create that before you leave, because if you just jump to another organization, now you got to build your brand all over again. You got to deliver results first before people are going to look you in the eye. You've got to get your team to trust you. That's a really hard job to do all of that. If you've got some of that done in the place that you're sitting right now, why don't you make that a whole lot better?
Yeah.
So that literally I was coaching someone today and I said, if you're going to leave, have them cry when you go out the door because you're leaving. Not don't.
You're going to take your problems. You're going to take your problems with you if you don't get them solved
right
where you are. But that's no different than any relationship. That's with marriage. That's with it's hard to see though. It's a bitter pill to swallow, right? And that's why I do encourage the book, because you got some good ways to navigate this with grids and good practical way to do it. So, but I've had two conversations this past week with two COOs. Ironically, one was a CIO that became a COO of a big insurance company. The other was a CIO that became a COO of a company out on the West Coast. And they've been observing change fatigue within their organizations, and that there's been so much acceleration of the probably pandemic induced that they're sensing that yet something else to bring into the company it's causing issues. I don't know what to call it. And they said that, Bill, if you run into anybody who can measure change fatigue, like absenteeism and not showing up for appointments, things like that, they can measure so they can get ahead of this. Have you thought about that at all, Lisa? Or have anybody asked that question before?
Definitely. When I first got to Dewberry, because there was so many opportunities for me to add value very quickly. And generationally, I had different responses. So change fatigue, maybe with our more mature generations, we're slow your roll. And meanwhile, the younger, just coming out of college, who are tech savvy, are more. We can handle it. We can handle it. You're on the right path. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing. So when I hear change fatigue, I go, yes, but then I ask who and where. What part of the organization, when you're looking at change and what you want to do, who is going to be impacted the most, who's required to change the most, and then make sure you're marrying, what their needs are and their own, career journey and where they are in life to what you're trying to do. And that should be a philosophy thread that you pull when you're actually doing the change management part. And if you have
Sure.
some awareness with that, you can be a little bit more effective with how you bring about that change.
And it's interesting too, because the older folks in our organizations now, they may be with us for another 10, 15 years, just based on people living longer and healthier. And like, you almost have to, it's almost had to reinvent business as we thought, you know, when we were in our late teens and 20s, if you were in your 50s, you were old. Like you were so old. Now I feel like I'm in my 30s, you know, I'm around 50s.
Right, exactly. Exactly.
You're planning your retirement.
Did you know 50s was the new 30s? Come on.
So maybe we just got to reinvent like what it means to get old in a company. So that's that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, what things have I not brought up to you that you think as we wrap up that you know you've thought, oh, you know what, if Bill asked this question, I'd love to bring this point up. Is there anything that is strikes in you that you want to bring up to the listeners?
I would say there is some fear when it comes to the change that's happening in the world. Be grounded in your own, your own self-worth and what you need to do for yourself and the joy that you want to bring into your life, and be purposeful, have the right mindset, and you'll feel a sense of control. And that sense of control that you feel will give you the leverage to do the right steps that you need to do, and it will help you sleep better at night, and you'll be a happy person, and that helps all of us. So
you know, it's interesting. My daughter just went through just another intense lacrosse tryout for her team. You know, like half of the girls got scholarships to colleges already. You know, it's a tough team to make, and she was been really working hard at it. But you know, there's no guarantees. And I said, look, and of course, I had a little bit of advantage because I used to be her coach early on, and you know, U5, 6, 7. So we used to talk about this all the time with the team and her. But I said, look, you can only control the 6 inches between your ears, like truly control
right.
your perspective on this. And I said, just go out and pretend like, you know, it's day one, even though it's day 3 of trials, pretend like it's day 1. And you just give your best, and you walk off that field, and just know that's it. And because she was starting to kind of think about everything around her, and like, oh, what if she makes it and she doesn't? I said, no. I said, that's all stuff you can't control.
Right.
But it's interesting, you know, that it's one little example in a sports arena, but we're kind of in that arena every day. Like businesses are too big to control every factor, right? Every human being, and how people's parents treated them and such, and what you represent to them. Like we can't affect everything. What do you think about that?
100% agree. 100% agree. And there are unconscious biases. And oh, by the way, we all have them. It's okay. Not a bad thing. It's how we survive as human beings, to have bias. So there's so many factors that you cannot control. And there's so many stories that we tell ourselves. So if you can just worry about yourself, worry about how you move through the world, create alignment, pillars of goodwill, have the intent, assume positive intent on other people, and have your own positive intent to want to add value, help other people grow, help your organization. You're going to win if you do that.
I love that. Assume positive intent from everybody doing business. What a great. So I recommend everybody go buy this book, and it's The Joy Factor. I'm going to put it on the show notes. So if anybody forgets the name or any of this, that will make sure the show notes are on here to link to Amazon. And then we'll make sure Lisa gives us her favorite book from last year that she read from the business book club, or not the business book club, the book club. We'll add that as well. So, and many of you know I'm passionate about reading, and we'll make sure it's on there. But Lisa, this has been, I told you this is going to be an awesome one.
Yeah. I had so much fun. Thank you for this opportunity, Bill. Thank you, Red Zone. By the way, Red Zone rocks too. We hire them to help us with stuff, so you should too.
Thank you for the plug. Well, listen, Lisa, you have a great day, and we're done.
All right. Thanks, Bill.